Hello, welcome to Conway Video. In this video, I'd like to talk about gaps or um, gaps, empty spaces, um, incomplete products, incomplete software, and how that is actually not such a bad thing. And you can sometimes you can leave a lot of gaps, and you're better off doing that. So let's get started. Um, you may or may not have noticed. Some people notice that when I smile. Uh, Let me try and get the angle. Yeah, you can see there's a bit of a gap in my teeth. So yeah, I've got gappy teeth, and I've got one particular gap there. One day I might get it filled in, but so far I can't really be bothered. But I thought I'd start off that little kind of story to kind of get you thinking about gaps or empty spaces or incompleteness, imperfection, things not being quite finished, things being a little bit rough, because this happens in software all the time. No matter how hard we try to get things perfect, or actually sometimes we don't even try to get things perfect. Sometimes we just do a rush job and there are gaps and things don't quite work right. You know, you click something and it takes a little bit longer to load, or you build a component and there's one thing missing, and people just keep saying, oh, I wish we could just fix that one little thing. But I guess I want to talk about this more in the context of how gaps can be a good thing. They can be a way for you to save time, and the way that is the case is this. Let's just say you're beginning to build something. Maybe it's a new feature of the software or the interface or whatever it is you're building. And you're building this thing, and you come up to a bit of a wall. Let's just say that you've gotten to a certain point. You've got like some text boxes here. And then in the requirements, it says, oh, well, we want one of these text boxes here. We want it to be pre-populated with this data. And depending on who the user is, we have different strings or different data that we want it to be populated. So if they're this kind of user, we want it to be populated with this text. If it's this kind of user, we want it to be with this different text, and so on. And in order to do that, say you're a UI developer, you have to then pull that data from the backend. So you need an API on the backend that you can query and say, hey, API, please give me this data. Here's the user type that I have, and please give me the data to put into the text box, and then you'll write the code to put it in. And then you're delayed because maybe you have a dedicated backend developer on your team, and you have to wait for them to give you the API or to make the endpoint for you. And so then you're stuck. You can't deliver the code because it doesn't satisfy this one requirement, which makes you dependent on this other developer. Now, this is a bit of a problem, and here's the thing: you might actually you might actually be best off just going ahead and implementing the whole feature just without that particular feature of getting the text from the server and putting it into the box. And why I say this is, even though people are going to complain a little bit maybe, or just be a bit annoyed that it hasn't fully satisfied the requirement, the good thing is that you've been able to move forward. You've been able to release what you can release. You've been able to build what you can build. And if you've delivered that and gotten it through the pipeline and deployed it, and it's up there running and live, that is a huge thing. I would say in a lot of cases that is more meaningful, than having built an entirely perfect feature, but that you took twice as long to show anything. And there are several reasons why that's valuable. One reason is that there may be other delays in the process that you don't yet know about. For example, when you deploy your code, something might go wrong with the deployment or with a build, and you have to fix that. Or something might go wrong with the unit testing, and it takes you a bit longer to fix that. So you're going to be able to solve all those other problems right away. You're not going to be tied up waiting for some backend developer to give you some API and then having to solve those problems. You're going to be able to solve those problems almost immediately and then quickly get your code published and live. And that in itself is really valuable. So it means you're going to be able to identify any issues or problems ahead of time much more quickly. Another benefit is that your stakeholders, the people who care about this feature being released, they're going to see you moving forward. They might not see the complete perfect product, but at least they'll see that you made progress. And that means a lot to them. It builds trust. It makes them feel like, oh, I can trust this person to deliver things. It means, that they feel like you're a bit faster. You know, oh, this person was able to get this thing done in 2 or 3 days. It didn't, you know, take them, weeks and weeks waiting for some back-end developer, or maybe not weeks. That's probably exaggerating, but you know what I mean. It's gonna be quicker. Another thing is, if they come back then and see what you've done and they want to change things, they say, oh, we want to change this, we want to put an extra checkbox here, we want that to be a different color, all those sorts of things. They're going to be able to much more quickly give you that feedback, and you'll be able to get that feedback more quickly, and then that means that you have more information. So you have a better idea much earlier on about what they want and what the changes are going to be than if you just sat there waiting for the back-end developer to build the API so that you could finally make this perfect thing that, you know, in all honesty, it didn't need to be perfect from day one. So, you know, instead of beginning work on Monday and then having to wait till the following Monday to get feedback, you can get feedback on Wednesday or Tuesday or Thursday. You can get feedback much sooner from the stakeholders from the business about what you built and about what they like about it and maybe what they don't like about it. And I think that in itself is also very, very valuable. That's a useful thing. And if software is this sort of thing that people often want to see, especially as stakeholders, they often want to see what it's going to be like. And that often gets their mind going. It gets them thinking about, well, maybe this should be different, maybe that should be different. And that can be really useful and valuable. So instead of taking all this time to just build the perfect thing that's actually not going to be the right thing, you've just moved a bit more quickly. You've actioned the things you can action, and you've left the gaps, right? You've left the gaps where you don't know what the requirement is, where you need some data from a backend that you're dependent on, where there's some kind of problem or chink in the software or the architecture or the systems. Wherever it is that there's a problem or a delay, you've just left a gap and kept moving. And that's a good thing. You've kept that momentum going, you've kept moving, you've kept making progress. And the funny thing is that, even though it seems like you're putting yourself under more pressure or you're raising the expectations, I would actually say you're lowering the expectations in a way, because when you deliver, when you can deliver small things without being held up by these long delays, these long gaps, it's actually less work for you. It's much less work to just build the screens, build the text boxes, and just leave something blank, than to go back and forth with the backend developer all day trying to sort something out. It's much better. It's much quicker. And so if you work in that sort of way where you just leave the gaps, where you don't know, where you're stuck, where it's unclear, ambiguous, whatever, you just leave them as gaps. You can always come back and fill those gaps in later, but you're going to be able to get through your workday much more quickly, I think, because you'll be able to act much more quickly and precisely on the things that you actually know well, that you have clear knowledge of, and that you have the ability to act on. And so that means you'll actually be able to and you'll be able to show results quicker. And then if you can show results quicker, even though they're smaller results, even though they're less impressive results, because you're showing them more quickly, people in the business and the stakeholders and everything, they get the feeling that you're moving faster than you actually are. Now, I'm not saying to be tricky or sneaky or anything. I mean, you don't want to be like, you're not deceiving anyone, but at the same time, we don't want to overwork ourselves, right? We don't want to get into a point, into an unsustainable, velocity of work. We want to manage expectations so that we've always got a little bit of slack in the workday in case something really bad does happen that we actually do have to end up spending a couple of hours on, 2 or 3 hours on. And instead of staying up in the office until midnight, hopefully we can get out of the office more like around 7 or 8 p.m. because we generally our workday has a bit of slack, a bit of a buffer in it. So I'll probably make another video about this idea of buffers or slack or whatever, and keeping a bit of slack in your momentum so that you manage expectations well. But I think for now that I just want to make this general video about the idea of leaving gaps. If you don't know how something's meant to work, you've got to ask someone and wait for their reply. You've got to get some data from the back end. You've got to change the design or the architecture. You've got to install some new library, whatever it is. If for some reason you can't finish one small piece, don't let that one small piece hold up the rest of the process. Keep delivering, keep writing the code, keep getting the rest of it done, and just push it out there with the gaps and the mistakes, and let people whinge and whine about the mistakes. Hey, at least you did something. At least you acted on what you could act on. And then, when the other things get sorted, that API gets sorted, you understand that requirement better, whatever it is, then you can plug in those gaps and people are going to be really happy. But generally, they're going to be much happier that, in my experience anyway, they're going to be much happier that you just acted and got things launched than if you had waited for such a long time to try and make this kind of perfect thing that it was bound to change anyway. So yeah, that's all I got today. Thanks for listening.